Greetings and welcome back. It's your host, Gabe Morales. As many of you know, I worked for almost 25 years at the King County Department of Adult and Juvenile Detention. We had three main facilities there: the downtown Seattle Jail, the Regional Justice Center in Kent, located just south of Seattle, and the Youth Services Center, often called Juvenile Hall in many jurisdictions, which was located in Seattle's Central District. I often went there to help staff with training and assisted with incarcerated youth events and kept in frequent contact with several staff on upcoming problems, mainly gang affiliated youth who would likely soon be hitting our adult facilities due to them being very hardcore and very active out on the streets. Did the same thing with the Washington Juvenile Rehabilitation Administration staff at their facilities, which was the Washington State version of the California Youth Authority. My brother did time at one of JRA institution, Maple Lane School for Boys, for a major assault, nearly a homicide. I also worked for a short stint at the 80 League Group Homes as a gang specialist based out of the Azusa, California building, working under my boss, Jose Gallegos. Many youth there were coming out of Los Padrinos, Juvenile Hall in LA, and other facilities, or the California Youth Authority, and were on probation. So I have some direct experience working in the juvenile justice system and have worked hard for many years to deter youth from entering the system via my volunteer work, donations to youth programs, facilitating training with stakeholders, and doing YouTube educational videos like this one. The story of the California Youth Authority is a long and sometimes disturbing one. In 1850, California became a U.S. state. At that time, there were no correctional facilities for juveniles, so serious cases, about 300 boys under the age of 20, were sent to state prisons like San Quentin and Folsom Prison between 1850 and 1860. These even included 12, 13, and 14-year-old boys at that time. Even later on, juveniles were sometimes housed at adult prisons. Some of you may have heard me tell the story of one-time Mexican Mafia honorary godfather Joseph Radich Morgan, who was sent to San Quentin at 17 years old for killing his much older female lover's husband. I'm not sure why that happened because in 1907, supposedly all youth under the age of 18 were transferred out of San Quentin by a legislative decree. Maybe they had Joe's DOB wrong, or maybe they just wanted to teach him a lesson. I don't know. Regardless of their intent, he learned his lessons well and was state raised, a term that is often used for youth who grew up in the criminal justice system. In 1905, several county juvenile halls were established in California. Los Padrinos, that I mentioned earlier in Downey, California, where pre-dispositioned youth are housed, didn't open until 1957. In 1941, the Youth Corrections Authority Act was adopted by the California legislature. It was run by a three-person commission appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. It mandated the acceptance of all youth commitments under the age of 23, including those from juvenile court. That same year, the Whittier School for Boys was named the Fred C. Nels School in honor of the superintendent who served there from 1912 to 1927. Shortly after, in 1942, the Preston School of Industry, the Ventura School for Girls, and the Fred C. Nels School for Boys, previously called the Whittier School for Boys, were separated from the Division of Institutions and became part of the California Youth Authority. The first youth committed under the Act was YN number 0001. And today, if you ever run a record on a California offender and they have a Y in front of their numbers, that means they did time in the YA. In 1947, the first group of youth arrived at El Paso Robles School for Boys, located in San Luis Obispo County. Post-World War II, during the 1950s, was a time of change in the U.S. and for many juvenile justice systems. Gangs were very prevalent in several parts of the country, and people wanted these misfit kids straightened out quick. As I stated in my DVI video, the facility was once used for juvenile declines, or CYA wards deemed too dangerous for the juvenile system, and it was the birthplace of the Mexican Mafia. Individuals such as Luis Buero Flores, Alex Hondo Lechuga, Benjamin Topo Peters, Abe Ice Hernandez, Richie Ruiz, William Tuffy Castillo, Mike Acha Ison, James Rube Solo, mentioned in my last video, and the oldest still living Emero, Robert Cruz Juarez, and Raymond German Hernandez, whose family my mentor Robert Mocha Morrell lived with for a while when he was having problems at home during the 1950s when he lived in the Ramona Gardens housing project. All these individuals did time in the YA before becoming part of the big leagues. In 1960, the Youth Training School, also called YTS, opened in San Bernardino County in Chino and sat right across the street from the Correctional Institution for Men. The facility was later renamed the Hammond Dark Youth Correctional Facility. In 1961, the CYA was placed under the newly formed Youth and Adult Corrections Agency. I believe what soon became known as OH Close School for Boys was opened on that site the following year, and there were 3 facilities there until 1991 when the N.A. Chadarian School opened, which was a 600-bed institution that increased the number of training schools at the Stockton site to 4. In 1992, the CYA's first boot camp, 30 beds, opened at the Preston School, and it was named LEAD for leadership, esteem, ability, and discipline, and served as a role model for other juvenile boot camps in the country. In 1993, the second LEAD program opened at the Fred C. Nell School, but these boot camps did not seem to have much of a long-term effect on many youth. At that time, the boot camp model became very popular, promising the best of both worlds, reducing recidivism and lowering operating costs. But there have been numerous studies of boot camps since that time, and in almost all cases, the results indicated that there was no significant differences in terms of the time of average arrest frequency after graduation. In 2004, the Northern Youth Correctional Reception Center and Clinic in Sacramento closed. Additionally, the Ventura Youth Correctional Facility in Camarillo returned to a females-only facility. Then, in June of that year, CYA closed the oldest operating facility, the Fred C. Nels Youth Correctional Facility in Whittier, which community activists had long protested against. Margarita Adelita Farrell was an LA area schoolteacher and a well-known prison reform advocate who had a very cozy relationship and frequently communicated with several Mexican mafia members, including Raul Güero Sherm Leon. I understand that she had a nephew who was in the California Youth Authority, and she filed a complaint on his behalf. This was the beginning of a major reorganization within CYA due to numerous lawsuits, scandals, in particular gang violence, as well as some staff members' abuse of wards. At that time, CYA Director Jerry Harper, a retired LA County Sheriff's Department commander, was in charge. The CYA hired my friend, Brian Parry, as a consultant to do an assessment on the department, especially in regards to gang violence. He served under 4 different CYA directors and found that the average age in the YA at the time was 19. Legally, they were adults. He also found out that the CYA had a higher percentage of murders than in the adult system. The most violent offenders were at CHAD and YTS, especially after the integration of the Norte 14 and Sur 13 of affiliated offenders. And eventually they ended up solidifying the North at CHAD and the South at YTS. But these kids didn't even know what they were fighting for. The shoe war had started years before. Some youth over the age of 18 did time in CDC at places like Pelican Bay Shoe, but had to return to the YA to finish their time. Thus, were able to school younger wards about prison gangs. This occurred under Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, so efforts were made to remedy some of those problems. Schwarzenegger formed a committee that included Mr. Perry and 1 other police officer. All of the rest were social workers, lawyers, etc., that proposed things like stop calling them wards and start calling them students. A proposal was made to lock up most of the hardcore youth at YTS, but that was shut down by the CYA officials. Not much has changed today in the juvenile system, but much of that violence has moved to county facilities, and the adult system is even worse. 13 years of court supervision of the CYA system ensued. In 2005, the CYA became the Division of Juvenile Justice, or DJJ, within the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. In 2007, legislation State Bill 881 and AB 191 required most youthful offenders to be committed to county facilities, reserving those convicted of the most serious felonies and having the most severe treatment needs for DJJ. Kind of weird because many county juvenile facilities were having their own problems and scandals. Eventually, the DJJ's population was lowered from a peak of approximately 10,000 a decade earlier to only approximately 1,700 offenders. In 2008, due to increased bed vacancies, the El Paso de Robles and DeWitt Nelson Youth Correctional Facilities closed. And in 2010, Hammond G. Stark Youth Correctional Facility in Chino, previously known as YTS, closed. In February 2010, the DJJ reported to the Alameda Superior Court that it had complied with 82% of more than 8,000 policy and program changes required by the Farrell Plan. In 2011, the Preston Youth Correctional Facility in Ione was closed. I'll get into some details about that facility here in just a minute. In 2016, the DJJ was released from the Farrell versus Kernan lawsuit by Alameda County Superior Court Judge Kimberly Caldwell, ending a decades-long lawsuit. So Margaret Farrell and other supporters were pretty much successful in dismantling the CYA system, as well as effecting drastic changes on the adult CDC system, which accumulated in a major restructuring, especially in regards to the security housing unit programs after the end of hostilities agreement. Proposition 57 was proposed, allowing judges to determine whether juveniles should be prosecuted as adults. The bill was passed by California voters largely with the aim of reducing both adult and juvenile prison populations. In many cases, offenders had their sentences reviewed and reduced, which resulted in many releases from custody, either on parole or released with no supervision. Opponents argued that many dangerous felons would be released to the streets without any or much social reintegration strategies, creating a crime wave. Opponents argued that it would help end mass incarceration under unfair sentencing laws. In 2018, Governor Jerry Brown signed Senate Bill 1391, which prevented all 14 and 15-year-olds who were charged with crimes from being transferred to criminal courts for trial, even for violent offenses. The bill cited the necessity of taking into account adolescent brain development, which I agree should be taken into account. From my understanding, females' brains mature around the time they're 20 years old, but male brains take much longer. Their brains, according to scientific studies, are not always fully developed until they reach the age of 30. This is something that I always question. Why are there so many young males in our system? And I think there are multiple reasons. I just started reading a book, Notes on Being a Man, by Scott Galloway. I saw him recently on a TV show, and the conversation intrigued me. He states that rarely has a cohort fallen further and faster than young men living in Western democracies. Boys are less likely to graduate from high school or college than girls. 1 in 7 men report having no friends, and men account for 3 of every 4 deaths of despair or suicides in America. Even worse, the lack of attention to these problems has created a vacuum filled by voices espousing misogyny, the demonization of others, and a toxic vision of masculinity. But this is not a male issue, he states. Women and children can't flourish if men aren't doing well. And as we know from spats of violence, there is nothing more dangerous than a lonely, broke young man. After June 30th, 2021, no new youth were committed to the Division of Juvenile Justice, except for rare court-ordered exceptions. On June 30th, 2023, all juvenile operations ceased at the N.A. Chatterton Youth Correctional Facility in Stockton and the Ventura Youth Facility in Camarillo, as all DJJ youth were realigned to the care of counties per State Bill 823. So basically, here's a quick rundown of how the state juvenile system rose and fell. Now for a little more breakdown on the major facilities. The N.A. Chatterton Youth Correctional Facility in Stockton, I hope I pronounced that right, was one of the CYA's 2 maximum security lockups and held wards from the ages of 18 to 24 years old. As soon as they became 25 years old, staff came with a box and told them to roll it up as they were headed to the adult system. It was also called Chad, entered national headlines in 2004 when guards were captured on film kicking and punching wards. Long before the term schools to prison pipeline was used, a group of parents trekked over and over to the California state capitol to protest against the California Youth Authority. Books, not bars, they chanted, and the campaign slogan stuck. They gained support from numerous parts of society who felt children should not be locked up in cages, with the goal of shutting it down. And that goal was eventually attained for the most part. The Preston School of Industry, also known as Preston Castle, was a reform school located in Ione, California, where the Mule Creek State Prison was later built, in Amador County. The cornerstone of the facility was laid in December 1890, and it did resemble a castle. Multiple prison gang members were held there back in the day. And for a lot of interesting information on ties between the NF and the adult system and young NF members or associates in the CYA, you might want to check out my Preston video.
And today I'm going to talk about one that happened back in 1977. This was an investigation. I will not reveal who wrote it, but it was a major gang task force member in California. And this deals with gangs in the California Youth Authority back in 1977, in particular, recruits for the Nuestra Familia. And there are some key individuals mentioned in it that you may recognize. Some of them went on to be major leaders in the Nuestra Familia organization. The letter brings up quite a few security issues at the Preston School, but also mentions other California Youth Authority institutions.
Current federal NF General Sheldon Skip Villanueva was housed at the YA in 1980. He was then given a C number in 1981 and transferred to DVI in 1982. Fellow General Corny Tristan was housed at the YA in 1977 after he stabbed a taxi driver to death. He was then transferred to DVI in 1978 where he was accused of a couple murders. I believe the other NF General, Joseph Pinky Hernandez, did YA time in the late 1960s. And other prison gangs drew from the CYA system for new recruits. Besides the prison gang members mentioned previously, former Preston wards included Eddie Bunker, close friend of Joe Morgan, author of No Beast So Fierce and multiple movie scripts, and also played a minor role in Quentin Tarantino's movie Reservoir Dogs. Eldridge Cleaver, one of the main leaders of the Black Panther Party, was also housed there as a youth. Country singer Merle Haggard also did some time there as a teen. Man, I always thought he was an Okie from Muskogee. Oh well. Future MA hitman Mike Achaison did time there in 1956 for car theft and escaped from a San Francisco area juvenile hall. I know that J59 did quite a few videos on his time at Preston. I understand that he isn't going to do YouTube anymore, at least not for a while. That's too bad, but I do understand that it can be very taxing on your time and nerves. I didn't always agree with him, but believe he put out some good info, some good content, and I wish him the best of luck, no matter what happens. The Fred C. Nels Youth Correctional Facility was located in Whittier, but like I said, it was highly visible through a significant section of Whittier Boulevard, and like Chad, there was a lot of protest to shut it down. The youth training school located in Chino, across the street from the prison, made major headlines when on August 9, 1996, CYA counselor N.C. Baker was killed. I understand that she was hit in the head with a lock and a sock, stabbed and strangled to death when she was in the supply closet, and her body then was placed in a garbage dumpster. Her body was later found in a landfill in nearby Pomona after a long search and investigation. It was found that the killer, James Ferris, was one of those cases that I mentioned who was 24, turning on 25, and I guess was scared to go to an adult institution. And it sounds like his plan was to escape. He had been in the facility facing a life sentence for rape and murder and had been sentenced to life without parole. Eventually, he was convicted of killing Miss Baker, but it sounds like it didn't matter to him because he was doing all day, as they say, life without anyways. The homicide had been the first at a CYA facility since a teacher was killed at El Paso Robles School in 1975, according to a CYA spokesperson. In my last video concerning the Jamestown hostage situation / rape of an officer, there seemed to have been several security violations of Standard Operation Procedure, or SOP, and it seems to have occurred in this time as well, but resulted in a death. Even though most juveniles are now held in county juvenile halls, problems handling them within the criminal justice system continue to exist.
California Attorney General Rob Bonta is asking a judge to allow the state to take over control of the LA County juvenile hall system. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lolita Lopez in for Annabelle Sedano. NBC4 Investigates has done extensive reporting on the problems plaguing the county's facilities that house young people. NBC4's Conan Nolan joins us live from the newsroom to break down today's very, very important announcement. Conan.
That's right. Lolita, you know this story better than anybody, having covering it for so long. Now, the Attorney General just a moment ago called it a public safety crisis. California Attorney General Rob Bonta announcing that his office is going to establish a receivership for Los Angeles County's juvenile hall detention system, which he says continues to violate the law. Now, at a news conference this morning at the State Building on Spring Street, Mr. Bonta said he plans to file a court petition seeking to have a receiver appointed to oversee operation of the juvenile halls, accusing the county of failing to comply with a series of court judgments and orders regarding management of the facilities dating back to 2021. He said the county remains out of compliance with 75% of the court judgments provisions, that there have been numerous cases of staff violating the law and placing those in the system in harm's way.
Nationwide, juvenile crime is said to be down, but as I've mentioned in previous videos, statistics do not always tell the whole story. During COVID and the Black Lives Matter protest and general anti-cop sentiment in many parts of the country, corrections and police officers quit in droves. At the same time, there was greater leniency in some areas, particularly in Democratic states, towards adult convicted offenders and even more so towards juveniles. So it is my belief that several things have been at work in recent years. First of all, since there are staff shortages, there are less seasoned officers on duty to prevent crime and make arrests, so many crimes may go unreported. Some officers have told me that they are hesitant to even arrest juveniles today unless it is a violent crime, such as murder, because these kids are often released on low bail or no bail and are right back out on the streets committing more crimes. To them, it can be a waste of time. Some of them have told me they feel if society doesn't care, why should I? So some feel it's best to avoid confrontations altogether, especially if they are near retirement. They've told me, Gabe, I'm not about to jeopardize my pension over some young punk. Many cars can go from 0 to 100 today, especially the souped-up ones that youngsters tend to drive. And firearms are easier to access than they ever have been. As I've stated previously, full brain development is not yet obtained by many young males, so often they will drive recklessly and act recklessly, shooting dozens of rounds at anybody who upsets them, since they have low impulse control and quick tempers. It is all very sad, but it is my hope that we find some middle ground on these issues to help youth stay out of the criminal justice system in California and nationwide, but also to hold them accountable with increased penalties and repercussions for repeat offenses. So, I know that covered a lot, but viewers asked for some information on the CYA, and you got it. I'll be taking most of the rest of the year off, but may do a couple special features. Don't worry though, I'll be back next year to cover some other jails and prisons around the nation. For now, I hope you have a happy Thanksgiving and a blessed holiday season. Now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.